This week, in our first segment, Rickard Carlsson, co-founder and CEO at Detectify, discusses collaboration rules, challenging transparency in modern AppSec. In the enterprise news segment, HackerOne enhances security testing platform. Palo Alto Networks expands its Unit 42 cybersecurity consulting group. Thoma Bravo to take cybersecurity firm Proofpoint private, close to $15 billion. BlackRock, Tudor Group, back cybersecurity startup Deep Instinct, and more. In our final segment, we air a pre-recorded interview with Joseph Carson, Chief Security Scientist at Thycotic, to discuss authentication versus authorization, why privilege access matters. So stay tuned for all of that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Hey IT and security pros, if you remember one thing from today's episode, it should be to check out the leading cloud directory platform, JumpCloud. JumpCloud's directory platform makes it easier to solve today's IT challenges by unifying device and user management through a single pane of glass. With JumpCloud securely managing your users and their devices, doing common things like onboarding and offboarding remote workers is easy. Try JumpCloud for free today at securityweekly.com/JumpCloud and help your organization move to a modern, secure hybrid work model. Wide-scale adoption of cloud applications, an increase in remote workers, and expansion of branch offices has rendered the centralized, on-premises security model impractical. Enter Cisco Umbrella. Umbrella now includes secure web gateway, firewall, and cloud access security broker functionality, plus integration with Cisco SD-WAN, all delivered from a single cloud security service. It helps businesses of all sizes secure their network and extend protection to roaming users and branch offices. Security doesn't have to be complicated. Get simple, smart, and powerful security with Cisco Umbrella. Visit securityweekly.com/Cisco Umbrella to learn more. We're proud to announce CISO Stories, a new podcast series in partnership with Cybersecurity Collaborative and Cyber Reason. CISO Stories features the candid perspectives and experiences of frontline senior security executives and dives deep into timely security topics. CISO Stories is hosted by Todd Fitzgerald, VP of Cybersecurity Strategy at Cybersecurity Collaborative, and Sam Curry, Chief Product and Security Officer at Cyber Reason. Listen weekly as they speak with extraordinary CISOs by visiting securityweekly.com/CSP.
Welcome to episode number 225 of Enterprise Security Weekly for April 28th, 2021. I am your host, Matt Alderman, still sitting in for Paul Asadorian, but don't worry, he's coming home today. Adrian is also off this week, so I have the Tyler show. I get two Tylers for my co-host. Welcome Tyler Shields first.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to see you again, Matt.
And joining us to sit in for Adrian today is Mr. Tyler Robinson. Tyler, welcome.
Thank you. This could get really confusing really fast.
It can. I got to call you like S and R or something to be too straight.
We're going to have to come up with a code name of some sort, yep.
Yeah.
What's our safe word?
Wait, that's the other show. That's tomorrow night's show.
That's right.
Do you want to stay in the loop on all things Security Weekly? Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to your favorite podcast catcher or our YouTube channel. Sign up for our mailing list, join our Discord server, and follow us on our newest live streaming platform, Twitch. Our next live webcast will be on April 29th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, where you will learn how to prepare for and prevent modern ransomware attacks. Our next technical training will be on May 6th at 11 a.m. Eastern. This technical training webcast will explore common misconfigurations of Nginx, the damage they could do, and how to avoid them. Also join us May 13th at 11 a.m. Eastern for a technical training with Thycotic to see how attackers gain access to endpoints and learn defensive strategies to protect against those attacks. Visit securityweekly.com/webcast to register now. If you've missed any of our previously recorded webcasts or technical trainings, they are available for your viewing pleasure at securityweekly.com/on-demand. This segment is sponsored by Detectify. To learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/Detectify. Detectify is led by entrepreneurial tech nerd Rickard Carlsson. As one of the co-founders, Rickard has grown Detectify from a group of ethical hackers with an idea on how to make the internet safer to an international industry challenger that's 140 plus people strong, combining software automation with the knowledge of elite hackers and scaling it to the masses. Detectify makes security a collaborative effort that changes traditional ways of working. Rickard has a background in tech and management consulting and has lived and worked in Sweden, India, and the US. Rickard, welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Now, there's a little history with Security Weekly, at least to the folks on Security Weekly. Paul and I did a lot of research when we were at Tenable. We worked closely with Rickard and the Detectify team way back then. So it's a pleasure to have you come on and talk about what you do, because you were one of our recommendations way back then. That was probably almost 4 or 5 years ago now.
Yeah, I think it was 5-6 years ago. I think we were in the conversation with the Tenable team and see if we should join up with them or not. But we, I guess, had a mutual decision to not do that.
Right. So we're going to talk collaboration, and so I'm a big proponent in a few things, and most people know this, right? I think application security, identity, and data security are kind of the core pillars of the future of security. The way we've treated security over the years has always kind of been like this afterthought. And when we think about what's happened in the application security space, we've definitely seen a shift in the way applications are being built and deployed. And if we're not collaborating between the development teams and the security teams, we're going to run into a lot of issues. And so let's start there a little bit with some of the challenges around the old way of thinking about application security and development.
I think I'm going to reference a few, dialogues I have with maybe some of our more customers or prospects that we work with in more traditional industries. There are people that says, "Oh, I want to test things in pre-production and for security, but I don't want to give my developers access to the results because they might use it against us." Or the notion of when you are operating in a DevOps team where production and pre-production is maybe almost, it's the same thing. It's just 15 minutes apart. It's not that you had, a testing cycle for 3 months and then you build it and then you run it and then you're having a verification environment and everything just moves so much faster. And if you're trying to do security in the old way, you're going to limit the way that you can actually do innovation. And I think also one of the collaboration is that the awareness and knowledge, I guess, in different organizations and how you govern it is very different. We have one company or one customer that is amazing doing it. They have made security information available across all products they offer. They have about 250 different products, and they have made it available for dashboards to everyone at the company to view, and they're putting like executive and product owners and product managers compensation related to security. So that's also, how the people are integrating and thinking in very different ways in security. That is a very different from saying no one should see my results because they are, the most critical information, and then we need to guard it very, very heavily. And I think there's a lot of things related to, do you see vulnerabilities as something that is a very few people should have access to? Or do you break the rules of, least privileged access actually and make it available to as many as possible for more people to learn about it? I think that's where some of the fundamental shifts between a modern company and a bit more traditional company sits, I think.
Yeah, I can go a lot of different directions, but I want to start with one thing you pointed out, and I want to reiterate a little bit.
Yeah.
Frequency. The frequency now is different. Remember, back in the old days, because I've been in the vulnerability management space for a long time. I worked at Qualys and at Tenable, and if we could get our customers to scan their network on a monthly basis, we thought that was progress. Now think about this from an application development. You said the difference between staging and production is 15 minutes. That's a frequency level I don't think most people are used to. And so if there isn't collaboration happening and this frequency is accelerating, talk about the blind spots in an organization in how secure an application is.
Yeah, because if you stay on that topic, many people said, oh, for every step earlier you find a vulnerability, it's a 10x difference. So if you find it in pre-production versus production, it's a 10x cheaper. And if you find it one step earlier, there's another 10x and another 10x. But when you have, as many of the organizations that we work with, they have fully integrated domain-driven development teams. They design, code, ship, iterate, and they do it multiple times per day. And there are no, that sense, major rollout processes. And then you talk to a customer saying, how often do you test your production environments? No. That's something that we do on an annual penetration testing or something similar. But come on. And how quickly can you feed that information and back to the software engineers building things? And this is it's something that is fundamentally broken in this information process.
Yeah. So when you think about collaboration, where do you start? Because I used to, when I was in the container security space, I used to end with a set of questions like, hey, security folks, here's what you should ask. Like the first question you should ask is the development team, hey, you guys using containers? Like, is that where is there still that initial dialogue between the security team and the development team that's not happening? Is that where we start our collaboration efforts?
I guess the collaboration effort, I guess the difference is security a controlling organization or an enabler? I think that's the difference in mindset. Are we monitoring things people are doing, or are we helping people doing the right thing?
Right. So and we know what. Oh, go ahead.
Quick follow-on question. I have a quick follow-on question for you, Rickard. You mentioned the concept of shift left and moving earlier and earlier to find the vulnerabilities earlier in the cycle to save money. But when your cycle runs every 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or even in a truly continuous manner, it kind of breaks that approach. At a higher level, then, is shift left in that capacity? I hate to use the word dead because it's kind of an overstatement. Well, it's a clear overstatement. But is it a situation where we shouldn't be focused as much on shift left and should be instead focused on continuous or just in time, or finding the right tooling models that operate in that pace versus really pushing for a shift left approach?
Yeah, because I think so. Because if I look at our own, how we build our products, we put things into production behind feature flags. So the notion of, and then we test them, and then you roll out things, to 1%, and then to 3%, and then to 5%. And then if it goes well on 5%, then you move to 50%. So the whole notion, I think, of that you need to test that you are, and also that you're able to test things in a shift left manner, I think that is to some extent a bit applying an old methodology, actually, because shifting left is not about it. It's about the development pace is moving so fast, and the importance is how fast can you get the information to the engineers and how fast can they act on it.
Yeah, I've spent the last few years kind of considering that opinion, and I agree with you completely that shift left as a concept is kind of an antiquated concept and is really now it's test in the appropriate moment of time, but not even in the appropriate moment of time, although that's important. I think it really comes down to testing where your testing tools have the speed of delivery in the appropriate moment of time. And if you can match those two things, that's how you increase the pace of innovation of your business as opposed to being a roadblock.
Yeah, and you need to use the right tool for the right amount of time. If things that are going to run in your build pipeline, they need to be very fast. Things that you want to run on your production environment and maybe running more complicated fuzzing needs to be allowed to take a bit more time. But that the quickness in how fast can you then act on the information? Because I would say in many organizations, if you're then going to cycle this information through like a central vulnerability prioritization team, you're going to go through a product board, and then you're still even if you found the information fast, it still takes maybe 2 weeks to get it down the prioritization line and get it into production again. Versus if you can get that loop much faster.
And then that by default, one last question, I'll kick it right back to you, Matt. That by default then increases the need for instrumentation, runtime protection, runtime detection, ways of actually saying, hey, things that do get through that loop need to be stopped quickly. And really it comes down to speed and efficacy of that in conjunction with the speed of your application security testing left of production, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of relying on the fact that your upper level executives and the business as a whole from a culture standpoint understand this testing cycle and the security cycle. And then on top of that, the procurement department and the people that are bringing in these penetration testers or these testing services, those companies also have to understand this development life cycle and where they need to be testing, because traditional testing isn't going to catch any of this. Traditional testing is going to look at this app at this point in time, the next app at this point in time. And as you're saying, that development life cycle is moving so quickly that doesn't provide any value at all. So getting upper management to buy in on this as a whole organization, and then having a good testing company or tooling to help handle this, those are two separate problems that have to be solved too, right?
Yeah. And this is what I mean. This is why the notion that we sometimes put it in collaboration rules, because you need them to have the collaboration, as you see it, between security, upper management, and the engineering organization. Because if either tries to be a roadblock, the only thing he's going to get is that things get slower and that you actually worsen your security posture.
Yeah, so I want to double click in there a second, because to Tyler Shields' point, right? This whole concept of shift left, shift left, shift left. Is it more continuous testing? I mean, are we moving to an environment where there's continuous testing going on, there's continuous reprioritization of bugs, and kind of this continuous integration and deployment of those fixes? Are we moving into these more continuous cycles instead of these point in time, like test at this point in the development process or test this app at this point in time?
I guess that's my take, because that's the only way to get it. We can look at some of our internal statistics. We using a crowdsourcing network to source the vulnerabilities that we build into our scanners. When we are as the fastest from we get a submission from our hacker to until it's live in our environment, fully weaponized payload, so we can actually run it in a good way. We're down to 15 minutes. And I think also people that working at different WAF companies or this sees that from an attack, it's public. It's a matter of hours until things are being weaponized and scanned across over the internet. So it is this speed that you need to act on. So you need to ingrain the whole notion of velocity, I think, into security.
Yeah, and that is a challenge for most security organizations. They're not used to that velocity or frequency, right? So that's a completely a change in mindset to really be able to account for that kind of frequency and velocity of change, because it's not where we historically came from.
I mean, I guess you're coming from setting up firewall rules, and you do it in a long process and sitting and configuring your Cisco router and putting all the configurations in. But that's not AppSec. That is protecting a perimeter of your corporate network. But that's, I guess, not the way that AppSec in the modern world works.
So does this model rely on having an internal AppSec team or internal testing teams in order for it to be successful?
I guess it all depends on your size of the organization. We see everything from very small organizations that manage it because you have dedicated people. But to get this, I guess, instrumented at scale, then you typically need an AppSec or a security engineering organization to set things up, because otherwise you will not get it at, I guess, this scale and speed and getting the flows of information moving. If you have a few hundred engineers or a few thousand engineers, you won't get the flow of information working otherwise.
So can you make this work with a smaller organization and getting that kind of collaboration and velocity set?
I think so, because we see it all the time. I mean, because I guess at least if we're using our customer reference system, we have everything from very small organizations with maybe engineering teams of 10 to 20 to 30 people up to organizations with 100,000 employees. And it works across the whole scale. Of course, there's quite a bit different rollout and implementation processes when you get bigger. But we see small people are able to fully get this up and running themselves.
Where do you see these teams? But I'm curious, where do you see these teams being kind of structured? Are they structured more under the security team, or are they being more structured under the development and the DevOps team so that they're closer to the development operation side of the application? I'm just curious. And it may vary, but I think this is a big challenge everybody's trying to figure out.
I would say absolute majority of the teams that we work with sits in the security organization. They sit in the security operations, security engineering, application security, or something similar. But in the best of worlds is that they are not reviewing individual vulnerabilities that much, or they are working as enablers, as educators, and helping the organization, change and transform.
Right. Yeah. So when you think about the product you're building today at Detectify, how do you think about architecting this platform that enables this collaboration, right? Because here's what I've seen in the past, right? We know that the developers really don't like to log into other tools. They have their IDEs and their build systems, et cetera, right? And all the security people early on said, well, I'm going to build this tool and have people log in to get that data. They don't want it. They want to integrate it, right? So as you think about creating a platform that allows for this collaboration, how do you integrate it where the developers and the security teams are leveraging that platform kind of holistically and not as like separate dashboards? And do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and we haven't really figured out well. I think the first thing, if you're building a tool for both then, so to say, security experts and maybe then non-security experts, is that you need to think about simplicity, ease of use, and reducing the noise in the tool. I think that was one of the first thing that we started off in the beginning, 7 years ago. It was Detectify. It was not, 100 different team and 100 different settings. It was just, you could log in, you could click on a button, and you would get your results. That was everything that was. And of course, now we added complexity and over time, but working with simplicity in mind and making sure that you don't need to be a security expert to work with a tool. I think that's one of the first things, actually, because we don't need to create barriers for people to get into security. It's an elite. It's too much of an elitist community as it is.
Can you give like a high level, like just a real quick overview of kind of how the tool flows and how it works? I'm not as familiar with this tool, so just kind of curious what the tool flow looks like from an implementation all the way to like what you actually do on a day-to-day with the tool.
Yeah. I mean, if you simplify, Detectify is in the base at the type of tools that have been around for quite some time. We are a dynamic testing, fuzzing type of tool. But I guess the way that we integrate a bit slightly differently. We integrate with your AWS Route 53 accounts to get your external footprint. We fingerprint it with the technology that you're exposing, and then you start to run tests on the things that are relevant. And then you decide, how do you want to get this information? Do I want to ship it through a custom webhook, or do I want to get it directly into my Jira? Do I want only the security team to access, or do I want to have all my 500, 600 developers access everything and can see everything? We want to split the information by different teams, so every team has their own access rights. So it depends very much the way that you would like to set it up and how you have designed the workflow inside of your organization. But I think the important is to try to adapt for these different type of workflows.
Right, which means integration, API integrations are very important because there's going to be a bunch of different tools and flows. It could be ServiceNow, it could be Jira, it could be any and all above different workflow tools. So that's important. What about from a dashboarding perspective, right? We were talking a little bit earlier when we first opened the segment about, creating the dashboards and putting all the results out there and kind of creating almost the board of shame. Not that that's the intent, but are you bringing aspects of that also into the platform to make it easier to see how the security levels of all these different applications look so that you can share that information easily?
Actually, we don't. Because we have, in a fairly early stage, or where we are currently with our resources, we have decided to not focus that much on what I call tie-friendly views, that we don't build that much tooling and dashboard for people that wear ties. So we rather focus our efforts on the people that actually going to use the tool rather than reporting. Because a small organization typically don't need that much reporting, and a big company, if you take a big bank, they have 40 or 50 other security tools, and they want to have their reporting in those tools anyway. And we don't see any, so that we want people, we don't measure actually how much people log into Detectify. What we care is about how they actually consume and act on the information. Because if the information that you get through Slack is sufficient, yeah, that's good.
So you're not trying to create the single pane of glass, which is the...
No, because that will never work.
Right, we know that. That's, again, back to the integration and why integration and APIs are so important.
Yeah.
Exactly. Tyler's questions for Rickard? Shields is quiet today.
Yeah,
I was going to say the same thing.
Come on. No, the AppSec space is a space that I've been involved in for 20 years myself. So it's nice to see, a different view, a different color being painted on it. What's your take? I'd love to hear your take, Rickard, on what I call the GitHub or the GitOps model, where people are integrating all of their security tooling directly into GitHub, GitLab, and doing that on commit. What's your thought on that? Because obviously that works well for, say, static analysis, but maybe not as cleanly on dynamic assessment techniques like you guys are running. What's your thoughts on the GitOps model?
I think, it doesn't work as well for us. The trick for us, we are working as a dynamic tool. We can shift information back and forth, and we can utilize it. I think that what is often overlooked, however, is some of the testing. We do a lot of testing also on third-party products that you might not, run through the same Git flows. I mean, do your Grafana instances or your Confluence servers that you host yourself? They are still web apps or web application or works. How do you test those? And how do you test third-party products that you're partially using in your infrastructure? And I think that is the difference that is often maybe then missing if you're thinking only on GitOps, because you cover the things that you build yourself, but maybe not the things that you host from others that is part of your, so to say, delivery or your operations.
Got it. And the follow-on, I guess, natural question to the GitOps question is there any risk to AppSec businesses or vendors with GitHub entering their market? I mean, I think some of the more traditional guys can't, the old school vendors, for obvious reasons that you're disrupting with the way you approach it, they're not only going to be disrupted by you, but they'll also be disrupted by the GitOps model as well. So is there any risk, I think, to the traditional AppSec approach, really getting legacy faster than we think it might?
Very much might be, but the trick is, I guess, how much of, if you do the static code analysis, yes, it will, of course, if GitHub delivers it, yeah, then you want to be building on. The question is, again, then that's not really my area, but how do you think about, what is the language coverage? Of course, GitHub will most likely build a very good dependency package, because I guess GitHub is the open source, and of course they should be able to do the best analysis on dependency security.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll leave it with, Matt, before I kick it back to you, is that I do like the fact, two things that you mentioned that get me really jazzed and excited these days are API integrations, ease of use, kind of that combo platter, and then just finding ways to get the data to the right people at the right time. If you can solve those problems in any security vendor company, you can win, because so many companies just target tech for tech's sake and make blinking lights, or as you rightfully denied, create dashboards just because the people that are paying the money need them. And so it's really refreshing to hear your approach. So back to you, Matt.
Yeah, I think the one thing, Rickard, I wanted to talk about a little bit is, look, they're static, right? And I think what GitOps is doing really helps on the static, the software composition, and some of the challenges there. But you still have to monitor runtime. And we can't forget about the runtime environments and these applications running, and because there are other attack vectors that can't be scanned for statically, and that's where I think the balance still has to be.
And I think so. If you look at the enormous footprint, we have organizations that uses our tool that exposing 10,000 domains towards the internet, and maybe on average 100 subdomains. So, and how would you be able to even get your Git operations into that? Because maybe you have done 200-300 acquisitions over the years. Do you have a standardized delivery model? So yes, everything about shifting left and testing things earlier, that is great, but that means that you need to have a very clean and very standardized operating model. I mean, I guess try to implement a RASP tool on somewhere around 10,000 domains that you barely know what you're hosting, and you don't know even how to approach them. So there is no really silver bullet here.
And that doesn't even take into account all of the SaaS integrations and API and key management between all of those different complex environments. And that's probably before acquisition. That's one of the things as an attacker, like we're constantly hitting SaaS applications because all these companies think moving to the cloud and getting off their infrastructure is the kind of the golden lining, right? But with that complexity and with all of those different SaaS applications, that becomes a much bigger problem to solve from an AppSec and even just a footprint standpoint. And doing that dynamically and not just statically is massive.
And I guess also, you have many organizations have massive control, very strict control on the firewalls and how to control and who is allowed to and how you do changes to a firewall. But the control of your DNS servers, anyone can request a new DNS entry and point it wherever they want in many organizations, even though that is actually, where the modern security is actually being controlled from is from your DNS, because that can bypass anything, your firewalls and everything, how you set things up.
Yeah, it's way more complex than just a bunch of static code analysis, for sure. Rickard, thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly.
Thank you for hosting me.
If anyone wants to learn more about Detectify or their application security platform, please visit securityweekly.com/Detectify. We're going to take a short break and then cover the enterprise security news for this week.